But sooner than that, next week, the long-awaited game, The Witness, is finally out. The follow-up to Braid from Jonathan Blow. Something totally different, not a sequel or anything from Braid. First person.
7 years in the making.
Yeah, I know.
Puzzle game, a new Myst.
This is no exaggeration, probably the game I've most anticipated, most excited for in a couple years.
Wow.
Probably. Cannot wait for The Witness. Braid was so good.
But you're in an office of people playing it right now.
I know, but how much can we talk about that?
We can't at all.
Yeah. I just want to play the finished retail final game and just experience it for myself. Every indication is that, reviews will be what they are, but every indication is that it is the real deal. Like, it's delivering on the hype. One of the best puzzle games ever made, coming from someone that I think is a bona fide genius. Here's the deal. I think Jonathan Blow catches a lot of flack for being pretentious. I don't think he's pretentious. I think he's just smarter than almost everyone, including all of us. Like, I think
I totally agree with
anytime he goes into a room, I think he's probably the smartest person in that room. And I think it's hard for that to not feel threatening to people. And when he talks about his big ideas and philosophy and trying to put one of that in games and thinking that most games are juvenile, that comes off as pretentious, but I think he's just being honest to himself. And so you have someone that, in my opinion, is a genius that took all of his fortune. He became a multimillionaire from Braid and poured all of his money and 8 years of his life and hired a team and
I think Deja scoop.
But you turned all that around, and now this is it. This is the product of this guy, taking his millions and millions of dollars in 8 years of his life to make the follow-up. Like that to me is the most exciting thing happening in video games.
It's an exciting, whether or not The Witness ends up being the kind of game that you might want to play. I mean, I know that you will find it that kind of game. I will. I think a lot of us will. But whether or not you look at that game and go, okay, yeah, that excites me. That's my thing. I feel like just that story has to be inspiring to you. Like you said, he could literally have just lived easy after that. After Braid and all that, he went through a lot to get that game made. I mean, so even after that, he could have just put his feet up and said, well, I did it.
Well, or just make another $10 game in another 3 years, another $10 game after that. But he went it's a big risk, and every indication. The thing that excites me most about The Witness, and I'm not having to watch my words because I'm not one of the people in the office playing it. That game is supposedly gigantic,
and I can tell you without going into specifics, it is gigantic. It's a lot big. I think a lot of people have the impression that, it's going to be a cute little adventure game with some puzzles.
Yeah.
I'll be done with it in 4 to 6 to 8, 10 hours.
We've never seen what is a AAA puzzle game?
Well,
Portal, I guess.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
And so it's to me, this is the first AAA puzzle game we've gotten since Portal, and that's incredible. It doesn't happen.
And there's a lot more content there than in Portal. Again, I don't want to talk specifics, but so much more content there than Portal.
Yeah.
Well, they announced this week that The Witness costs $40.
Yep.
People are so mad. Them being mad makes me so mad, and I normally don't bother getting involved.
Yeah,
right.
Wait, this is all a segue to get to a question from Damon?
Yeah, exactly. Yep. It's actually not from me. It's from Big Tony Style.
Big
Tony Style! I can be a little bit racist because I'm Italian.
It's fine. You got that vowel on the end of your name. It's fine.
Big Tony Style says, it's pretty surprising that most retail games still remain $60 a pop, relatively cheap compared to old cartridge games.
Good, yes, that is why it's...
We've started to see downloadable titles creep up just a little, from 15 to 20, sometimes even higher. When, if at all, do you see the price of retail games seeing a standard increase? So $60 has been the standard for 10 years, ever since the last generation of consoles, Xbox 360.
Yeah.
In that time,
it's tough.
Cost of AAA development has skyrocketed, and yet games still remain the same. One workaround is through season passes and downloadable content. They have effectively raised the price of games too.
Yeah, I feel like we've touched on this
$90, $100.
a little bit in Scoop before, where there's a concept in retail and lots of other industries called revenue per user, ARPU.
Yep.
And so it used to be a game with $60. You bought, Mortal Kombat Trilogy for the PlayStation. It was $50, and that was all you could ever get. But now the game still costs $60, but you do the math of you have a $30 season pass, and 10% of your players are going to buy it. So now you've upped your ARPU from $60 to $63 thanks to that season pass. And there's a collector's edition that's $100, but it only costs you $10 to throw all that garbage in the game.
Yeah.
So now every person that buys that collector's edition, so they're nudging the revenue per user up from $60 to $70 anyway, without having to actually increase the price of the game. But that will only hold for so long.
Right, and the thing is that people the funny thing about that is that when you listen to that spiel, it's some people would say, oh well, us as the player, like we're kind of getting hosed because they are already like, you know, jacking up the price. But I would totally disagree. What I would say is like that's actually a great value. Like when you look at it the way you did, that's actually a great value for us, right? Like if they can find ways to make the money they need to make and still offer me an option to just buy the game for a standard $60, that's like a win-win. That's like I never really understood like all the hate and backlash for some of these practices that are optional, because I'm like, you know, ultimately if them selling skins or, you know, day one DLC or whatever allows them to keep charging the low, what in my mind is a very low price of $60 for a AAA game, then I'm like, that's great. Like sell whatever you want to everyone else who wants it. Me personally, I don't care about that cosmetic stuff. I don't care about these extra little bells and whistles. If everyone else feels like they want to spend money on it, that's great. That just allows me to have a $60 experience. It's the same thing with free to play even. It's like, I'm glad that they, like in Dota 2, I've played 500 hours of Dota 2. I've spent $10 ever just because I felt bad once, and that I can have that kind of free premium experience only because these companies find other ways besides the point of sale price to make their money. So I say keep doing it.
I think
there's other forces too. I mean, digital games mean you can cut out GameStop entirely.
This is true.
And you don't, if you're claiming the $60 directly to the developer, you know that you're already making more money than you did before.
That's a fantastic point. That I would suspect, I haven't seen like the balance sheets of a big publisher, but I suspect that's a big reason the price didn't increase from 60 is because $60 at GameStop means, you know, EA actually takes home, I don't even know, 30, 40.
Right.
But when they get to sell it for 60 directly, there's lots of
shipping and packaging. And digital media is completely changing.
I mean, there is infrastructure for delivering the download. Like, it's not insignificant. You have to have a whole team of people delivering these digital games, but it's far, far less. And so, again, that's another way that every person that buys digitally, which is, you know, 25, 30, 50% of games sold now these days, that's more revenue per user in the publisher's pocket.
Yeah, and it's like, my opinion would be overall, like, do I want to see is it time for the price to go up? And all I would say is that depends on whether or not the gaming populace as a whole can start to feel better about all these ancillary things that companies are doing to make money. If you want to see that go away, or you feel like that's intrusive and it's bothering you and impacting your experience, if you feel like you're getting an incomplete game because your game doesn't have all those skins, then I'd say, yeah, you better start welcoming the idea of a $70 price point. If you don't mind that stuff and you see it, and this is how I feel, if you see that stuff as just optional stuff that goes on the side, someone else maybe enjoys it or wants to pay money for it, I don't really care. I'm happy with my $60 game and what comes in that package. Then I'd say, like, keep it 60 as long as you can keep your head above water and find a way to do it. Keep doing it, as far as I'm concerned.
I think that so far the discussion has been a little bit skewed, and I'm sure there's people screaming while listening to this right now, because when I was a kid, games were $60, and that was a lot more. So games have gone down, and I think they should continue to go down. And I think for the health of the industry and for the health of game development, for people to play more games and more new games, they need to be far cheaper. And we need to figure out how to develop them for far cheaper.
Well, all games?
I don't want the development to get bigger and more expensive necessarily, unless it's worth it. Because right now, there's a lot of games that are $60 that are much smaller than The Witcher 3.
Sure.
Right? I mean, there's a big tiered system. So locking it at 60 is already, I think, a negative thing.
It is it's a little weird that Witcher 3 and Rainbow Six Siege are the same price.
A Tomb Raider or whatever. Like anything that lasts 10 hours compared to...
And if a giant publishing company can price the same games at the same price, the net earnings that they have maybe balance out or whatever. What I'm trying to say is the business side of it completely aside, when I was a kid, I got a game a year or maybe 2 games a year, and it sucked.
Yeah.
And when I got another game, like if I was able to get another game, it was a used, like totally terrible game. Like this is like through college, you go to GameStop and you get whatever is $20 and play it. And I would love to see that turned on its head. I mean, I was hoping mobile games would completely disrupt the pricing scheme of stuff, because nobody would pay for a $20 mobile game.
But it has disrupted. Like you're talking about kids. Like kids are playing Clash of Clans.
Yeah,
they're not playing Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yeah. No, it has definitely. Yeah, you're right. But it hasn't changed the $60 price tag in any meaningful way. And I just think there's something to be said for the medium to progress and for games to get bigger and for people to be able to get into it. Prices have to be different.
Well, I agree.
And they have to be lower.
I agree with you in a sense, Sam, in that not every game has to be a $60 game, and I think finding that right balance between how much content you have and what level of production you've gone for, and what kind of long-term value that game is going to have for any given player has to play into that argument. I guess my saying that I'm happy to see the price go up or stay the same is mostly in the sense that if putting the price up prevents them from having to get into like business territory where they have to like trade off goodwill for their dollars, which is a painful position to be in. Like, let's be honest, I don't want to sound like I'm sympathizing with like companies that are making millions and millions of dollars, but it's tough. Like with a game like Evolve, like I famously gave that game like a big nice score, and I didn't really
Famous.
Well, in a weird kind of famous way, like more like infamous. Like people were kind of mad that like I gave it a 9, even though like there was all this day one DLC, and like my argument was like, well, I don't need those skins, so I don't care, and it doesn't affect my experience, so I'm going to give this game a superb score because that's what I think of the quality of the game. The flip side of that, though, is that did 2K do what they felt like they needed to do with the pricing of the DLC and the timing of the DLC and the new characters to make the maximum they felt like they needed to make on their investment? Sure, they did, but we also saw a great developer in Turtle Rock create a really awesome piece of software that honestly a lot of people walked away from because of what those prices were and the timing of that DLC. Does that mean that 2K was the bad guy in this situation? I don't necessarily think so, but like they're like everyone else are trying to figure out like where do you draw the line? Like what's a good balance of like people feel good about this practice, but we're also making the money long term that we want to make on these millions of dollars we're investing. So it's like if raising the price makes that whole tough like question go out the window, and they can just like make their money and keep their players happy once they adjust to the new price point. Maybe that's a win. I don't know.
Go ahead.
Wrap it up.
Yeah.
You can make your comment.
Oh, I mean, I just like that we live in a world where we have a wider range of. Talos Principle came out last year. I think it's on my mind because it's in the same wheelhouse as The Witness. I think that game was $50 when it came out.
Sure.
And The Witness is $40, and we see games come out at $30. Darkest Dungeon and Oxenfree are $20, and I can't think of any $10 games off the top of my head, but like we're still seeing things come in at that little bit cheaper price point. I'm playing Final Fantasy Record Keeper. It's free to play on mobile.
Yep.
And we said they run the gamut. And I think we're going to reach a point where like Call of Duty had, I don't know the details unfortunately, but it had like day one DLC that was not even really like, hey, if you want this extra thing, it was like stuff you wanted. It was like, a zombies map and like some other stuff like the digital collector's edition. And it was more than $60. And so in that way, they are sort of, I think Activision specifically is like priming people for games to not cost $60 anymore, because really you probably didn't want like the $60 version of that game. You probably wanted the $70 or $80 digital deluxe edition that included like this stuff that it is optional, like you can play the game without it, but this is what you want. This is where you want to be. And so we have that range now. I guess what I'm getting at is I'm glad we have a mid-range. We have a real plausible, like last generation, it was $60 or like Shadow Complex is $10. Like that was all you got. And now we have this mid-range of stuff like The Witness that I think is really healthy.
I feel like Shadow Complex was one of the first $20.
Was it? I thought it was 15.
I felt like that
15,
was like,
maybe 15 or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, very interesting discussion topic. Big Tony style.